Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Last time we got through the first 11 verses of chapter 10, which is, and we're just coming up on the verse which is the basis for the picture for the front of the book. Whether that new one or that old one, the picture is the same of Joshua talking to the sun. Though the way that ink drawing looks like it's the moon, but it is the sun. Anyway, so it's a battle that Joshua, remember that Gibeon and had made a treaty with Joshua, and together they're fighting these 5 Amorite kings. And God is on Joshua's side and enables Joshua's army to totally defeat them. So they kill, he slew them with a great slaughter, and they chased them by way of the ascent of Beit Horon, smote them to Azekah and unto Makedah. And then God, in verse 11, cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah. They died. They were more who died with the hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. Okay, so miracle number 1 is that God gave the 5 kings into the hands of Joshua and the people of Israel, right? In other words, enabled what seems to be that the Israelites were outnumbered, made it an easy victory. 2, that they were, God cast down these hailstones that killed even more of the Amorites than the Israelites did. Okay, so now we continue. We're at verse 12. Az yedaber Yehoshua la'Adonai b'yom tate Adonai et ha'emori lifnei b'nei Yisrael vayomer le'enei Yisrael shemesh begivon dom v'yareach be'emek Ayalon. Then Joshua spoke to God on the day that God gave the Amorites before the people of Israel, and he said, that is, Joshua said, in the eyes of Israel, meaning in front of Israel, the sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and the moon in the valley of Ayalon. So and then verse 13. Vayidom hashemesh veyareach amad ad yikom goy oivav halohi ketuva al sefer hayashar vayamod hashemesh b'chatzi hashemayim velo atz lavo kiyom tamim. There's a couple of Hebrew words there that I'm not familiar with, so I'll be looking over at the English. The sun stood still, and the moon stood until the nation had avenged themselves of their enemies. So, in other words, until the Israelites defeated the Amorites, the sun and the moon stood still in the sky. Is not this written in the book of Yashar? Now, the Torah refers to the book of Yashar also once or twice. I think there's at least one reference to it in the book of Numbers. We're not sure what this book of Yashar is. We'll look at the commentary momentarily. And that so is not this written in the book of Yashar that the sun stood still in the middle of the sky and below atz lavo, and hasted not to go down? We'll see what Alter says about that in a moment. Also about translating that word atz, aleph tzadi, which I'm not familiar with. So it hasted not to go down about a whole day. Okay, so let's look at the commentary here. The miracle of the sun standing still. The rabbis list this passage, then spoke Joshua to the Lord, as one of the occasions when Israel uttered song to God. So perhaps what Joshua is saying here is that this is all of Israel singing, and not just Joshua singing. Some modern commentators attempt to eliminate the supernatural element from the incident by stressing the poetical form of the language, which they understand as implying no more than, may God grant us victory before the sun sets. That the narrative was early understood as relating a miraculous prolongation of the day is evident from ECCLUS. I'm not sure what that abbreviation is. Is it Ecclesiastes? I don't know. No, I'm not sure what that is. Chapter 46, verse 4. Did not the sun go back by his hand, and did not one day become as two? Although the text of the praise is absent from the text, the scripture informs us that Joshua nevertheless praised the Almighty after his prayer to him. It is also possible that the words, "Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon," comprise the prayer, while the entire verse 13 comprises the song of praises recited by Joshua to the Almighty. This latter theory is supported by the Mechilta, which is a collection of midrash on the book of Exodus, which lists this among the 10 songs mentioned in the scriptures. So now this is the new commentary. The old commentary says this: the miracle of the sun standing still. The rabbis list this passage as one of the occasions when Israel uttered song to God. Some modern commentators attempt to eliminate the supernatural element from the incident by stressing the poetical form of the language, that the narrative was an explanation to account for the phenomena by natural causes may be cited. A wave of intense cold in that hot country produced this terrible hailstorm. Such occurrences are not uncommon even now in Syria. It's always at a time of intense cold that refraction of the sun occurs. Travelers in polar regions give many instances when the sun is seen for several days when they know the orb is 1 degree below the horizon. This refraction of the sun is quite a common thing, and so it appeared to the conquering Israelites as if the sun hasted not to go down about a whole day. The miracle on this view consisted in the timing of the phenomenon. Maimonides explains about a whole day as the longest possible day, and the phrase indicates that that day appeared to the people at Gibeon as their longest day in the summer. All right, so it's interesting that the new leaves out a lot of this from the old about how to explain this phenomenon. My question about the whole thing first is, the battle's over in verse 11. It seems like the battle's over. Why is Joshua asking now to keep the sun in the sky? That just so the placement of this just doesn't make sense. It seems it would make more sense to put these two verses before the battle started, not after the battle started. So that's my issue. So altar, if we look at altar in ancient Israel on page 51, O sun in Gibeon, halt. The reason for the prayer is explained in the next verse. The sun is to halt its movement across the sky and the moon not appear in its place, in order to give Joshua a long extension of daylight in which to hunt down and destroy his enemies. Okay. And then the book of Yashar. Right. So just a second. Which is verse 13. He says is verse 14. This lost text is mentioned in 2 Samuel 1:18 as a literary source in which David's elegy for Saul and Jonathan appears. It's safe to assume that it's a very old book, largely poetic or even epic, in which martial themes are prominent. The name Yashar would appear to mean the upright, though Shmuel Achituv, mindful of the practice of calling books by their opening words, interestingly proposes that it could mean he sang, revocalizing Yashar as Yashir. Okay. The sun stood still. This translation construes the remainder of this verse as a continuation of the quotation from the book of Yashar. It does not scan as poetry, but the language is elevated with epic flourishes. Did not hasten to set. So that is the word atz, aleph tzadi. Psalm 19 imagines the sun racing across the sky like a warrior running on his path, and that mythological imagery is probably behind the verb hasten here. Okay, so he doesn't get to anything about the placement of this poem, the miracle of the sun standing still, whether it happened or not. It's just interesting to me. Okay, well, the commentary goes on page 56 in our book, verse 12, Valley of Ayalon. This is the valley that spreads out beside the straight road that leads from Sha'ar Hagai to Ramlah. It was named for the city of Ayalon, an ancient city found above it and mentioned in the Tel El Amarna letters. Okay, now the Ayalon, the major expressway in Israel is the Ayalon Expressway, which those of us who have been to Israel in the past 10 years have been on this highway. If you're going from the airport to Tel Aviv, you can't avoid it. You're on this major expressway, which also continues through Tel Aviv and heading north all the way to Haifa. Okay, so the Ayalon goes along the Ayalon River. Well, river is always with air quotes when it's referring to so-called rivers in Israel, because they're essentially streams. It's kind of like rivers in Israel might be like the mighty Patuxent, that is the boundary between Montgomery County and Howard County, right? So that's about as wide as rivers get in Israel. So the Ayalon is half the size of the Patuxent. Okay, so anyway, so the commentary is just giving us some geography. At that time, the moon was standing opposite the valley of Ayalon, far from Gibeon, for Gibeon is in Benjamin's territory in the south, and Ayalon is in Dan's territory in the north. And that's Rashi, and Rashi doesn't know anything about geography of Israel because he hasn't been there. So the Ayalon is near Tel Aviv. Okay, so what tribe there? Let's see. If we look at the maps that are in the Eitz Chaim, just 1 second. Let me find it. There they are. Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah, it depends. Yeah, so if the third map of the maps in the Eitz Chaim would put Ayalon, yeah, in Dan's territory. Now, you know, there's a whole other question about where Dan is, because the Dan is also up north. If you look at this map above the Sea of Galilee, and then Dan is also here. How that happened is a whole other question for biblical scholars. So Dan's territory is right there. Benjamin is not in the south. Benjamin is right above Jerusalem. Okay, what's in the south is Judah and Shimon. Okay, and you also have Philistine territory there too. Okay, so that seems to be, according to that map, what scholars accept as how the territories, how the tribes settled in the land of Israel. Okay, so the commentary goes on. Joshua asked that the sun remain suspended over Gibeon and the moon over the valley of Ayalon. According to the Midrash, the battle took place on Friday, and Joshua asked that the day be lengthened so that there would be no need to desecrate the approaching Sabbath. Okay, so that's Kimchi trying to explain why Joshua would need the sun to stay in the sky. So that's a funny kind of midrash to say, oh, it must have been a Friday and he didn't want to worry about violating Shabbat. Okay. The battle extended from Gibeon, where it was fought, to the valley of Ayalon, where the Israelites pursued the enemy. Okay, so that's a reasonable comment from Abarvanel, trying to understand why, where it seemed like the battle was over in verse 11, why it's continuing. Okay, and okay, now the old commentary has a much shorter comment for verse 12 and says, for Valley of Ayalon, a broad, fertile plain from which 3 roads branch out to Jerusalem. Throughout history, we see hosts swarming up this avenue or swept down it in flight. All right, so that comment from a scholar is just to explain that this is a common, a well-traveled place. Okay, so now our commentary on 56 continues with the book of Yashar, literally the book of the upright. Upright may denote Israel, the upright nation, see Yeshurun, Deuteronomy 32, but it's more probable that upright refers either to individuals who are celebrated in this work, such as Joshua and Saul, or to the great deeds which are recounted therein. David's lament over Saul and Jonathan is quoted from it in 2 Samuel 1:18. So I could be wrong in a reference to Sefer HaYashar in the Torah. Probably what I'm thinking of is other references to other books that are in the Torah. Maybe it's Sefer Milchamot Hashem, like the book of wars of the Lord. I think that could be a reference, so maybe not Sefer HaYashar. This might lead one to infer that it was a compilation later than David. It is, however, possible that the collection was added to in course of time, and the present quotation belongs to an earlier form. A similar collection, the book of the Wars of the Lord, is cited in Numbers 21:14. Okay, therefore, I didn't read ahead. Yeah, that's the reference I was thinking of. Okay, and it goes on about a whole day. Maimonides explains about a whole day as the longest possible day, and the phrase indicates that that day appeared to the people of Gibeon as their longest day in the summer. So we had read that already in the old, and it's interesting that the new puts it here. Okay.
Jonah, these books that they're referring to are the books that were left out of the canon when it was codified. That
don't know.
Okay,
they're referenced in our Bible, but we don't have any remnant of it at all. So your guess is as good as mine. Really don't know. Okay, so let's read on a few more verses. V'lo haya kayom hahu lefanav v'acharav lishmoa Adonai b'kol ish ki Adonai nilcham liYisrael. And there was no other day like that before him and after him for God to hear or to follow, I would say to follow or obey the voice of a man. It's the old translation that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man. It's not just hearkened, but hearkened in order to do something. Okay, so it's not just that God listened. God listened and did. He answered Joshua's prayer. Ki Adonai nilcham liYisrael, because God fought for Israel. So there was no day like this before or after. Well, I don't know about that. What kind of reference is that? So Moses asks God to forgive the people, and God forgives the people. Elijah is on Mount Carmel with a competition with the Baal priests. Elijah asks God to come down and consume the sacrifice, and God consumes the sacrifice. So it's just interesting. Just two examples that are coming to the top of my head right now. I'm sure there are other examples in which God is listening to the prayers of people. Even in the book of Esther, where God doesn't appear at all. The people of Israel are saved when Esther asks the people to fast for her and pray for 3 days. Then, miraculously, Haman's plot is foiled. So I think there are plenty of other places. So it's just interesting to me that this says here, God before or after didn't hearken to the words of a person.
Right. Couldn't you even add Jonah? Couldn't you even
Yeah.
add Abraham from the very beginning, where God, he said for Sodom and Gomorrah, there were like 50 people,
right. That's
45.
right. Bargaining. That's right. Right. So there are plenty of examples before and after in which God is listening to man. So why this comment says this here, I don't know. So we'll look at the commentary soon, but let's see. So down below, and there was no day. This statement gives an indication of the recognition that a great miracle had occurred. Okay, so that's the only thing that a Barbanel says. So, or after it, these words seem to imply a late date for the composition of this book. They merely express the intense conviction that never again would God so signally manifest that he was the ally of Israel. Okay, so maybe it's because God used the universe as a signal, right? Causing the sun and the moon to stay still in the sky. So maybe before this and after this, God didn't do this. Well, you could argue the crossing of the Red Sea and the 10 plagues would be using forces of nature in a way they haven't been used before. You could argue having Balaam's donkey talk could be a way of using that. But was there anything else with the forces of nature after this? Well, I don't know. Elijah's student and the prophet who takes over after him, had some miracles where he brought this kid back to life, right? And also the poor woman pours the oil and keeps on pouring the oil into as many containers as she can find. Could argue that that's a miracle that goes against nature too. So again, it's just interesting to me that this phrase, and neither before nor after was it like it, is just is interesting. Right, the old doesn't add anything to this. Let's see if Alter says anything about this, and he does not. Okay, so we're just left maybe confused or questioning this statement. Okay, 15. Vayashav Yehoshua v'chol Yisrael imo el hamachaneh ha-Gilgala. Joshua returned to Joshua and all of Israel with him returned to the camp at Gilgal. Vayanusu chameshet hamelachim ha'eleh vayechavu v'me'ara v'makedah. And these 5 kings fled and hid in a cave in Makedah. Vayugad liYoshua lemor nimtzeu chameshet hamelachim nechbeim b'me'ara b'Makedah. And it was told to Joshua, saying, the 5 kings are found who were hidden in a cave in Makedah. 18, Vayomer Yehoshua, Golu Avanim Gedolot El Pi HaMe'ara, Vahafkidu Aleha Anashim Leshomram. So Joshua said, roll big stones to the mouth of the cave and guard it. Set up men to keep watch and guard it. Okay, so the English, there's a couple more words there. Hifkidu, and so Joshua appointed men to guard it. Okay, 19. Va'atem al ta'amodu, ridfu acharei oivechem, v'zinavtem otam, al titnum lavo el arehem, ki netanam Adonai Elohechem b'yedchem. And you don't stand still. Chase after your enemies. V'zinav temotam. And so it says, smite the hindmost of them. Yeah, hit them from behind. Al titnum lavo. Don't let them get back to their cities. Because God, your God, has given them into your hands. And I just want to point out that on Shabbat Zachor, I referenced a Devar Torah from a Rabbi Ethan Tucker about the section from Torah that we read on that Shabbat, which is the Shabbat immediately before Purim. So the 3 verses tell us that we're supposed to remember what Amalek did, that they attacked us from behind. So the word for attacking from behind there in the Torah is used here also, using the word zanav, which means tail, and turning it into a verb. So attacking from behind. So Ethan Tucker's Devar Torah was about perhaps what are we supposed to be blotting out on this Shabbat? Are we supposed to be blotting out Amalek or their memory? Or are we supposed to be blotting out something that's in our own psyche as Israelites that reminds us of Amalek? And he uses this verse because this is the only other verse in the entire Bible where that verb, taking the word for tail and using it as a verb, is used. So you have that one place in the Torah and that one place here. And Joshua's commanding the people of Israel to attack their enemies from behind, to do to them, to their enemies, what Amalek did to us. And the issue for Ethan Tucker is the danger that this does about how we could be degraded in our own ethics and morality by allowing an aspect of our most hated enemy to enter into our own personality. All right. So I just want to point that out here, that there's possibly nothing positive here about what Joshua's commanding. They're already defeated. Why chase after them in this way? Well, because the commandment was in Deuteronomy, you're supposed to totally annihilate the enemy. So even though they were defeated, they weren't annihilated yet. So perhaps Joshua is saying to them, you got to chase after them, make sure they don't get back to their cities so that they're totally defeated. All right, we'll look at the commentary soon, but let's go on. 20. Just one second, just want to see how long. Yeah. Vayehi kechalot Yehoshua u'vnei Yisrael lahakotam makah gedola me'od ad tumam v'hasridim sardu mehem vayavou el arei hamivtzar. So this is interesting. When Joshua and the people of Israel finished smiting them greatly, lahakotam makagido lamaod, a very great smiting. So it was an utter defeat until they were vanquished. So you would think they're totally killed. Vahasridim, and the remnants. There are few stray people. Vahasridim sardumehem. And there was some strays straying around, and they made it to the fortified cities. And the remnant which remained of them had entered into the fortified cities. All right, so it's fascinating that the narrator is describing a great, utter defeat. And yet, there are still a few strays left over. So is it an utter defeat, or is it not an utter defeat? So they defeated, but there's still a few strays around. Okay, verse 21, Vayashuvu kol ha'am el hamachaneh el Yehoshua Makedah b'shalom lo charatz livnei Yisrael leish et leshono. So all the people returned to the camp to Joshua at Makedah in peace. Well, I thought they were in Gilgal. Verse 15 said they're in Gilgal. Now they're in Makedah. Well, Makedah is where the cave is, where the kings are. So the kings are hidden in a cave in Makedah. The people are back in Gilgal, but now they're in Makedah. So what is it? Okay, so they went to the camp. The people went to the camp of Joshua at Makedah in peace. None wetted his tongue against any of the children of Israel. What does that mean? None wetted his tongue against the people of Israel. Let me just look, see how Alter translates this. And the troops came back safely to the camp to Joshua. No man so much as snarled at the Israelites. So why would the troops be snarling? Okay, so 22, Vayomer Yehoshua, Pitchu et piha me'ara, v'hotziu elai et chameshet hamelachim ha'ela min ha'me'ara. Joshua said, open the mouth of the cave and bring out to me these five kings from the cave. So now, are there two things going on? Like there's some people watching the cave, other people who are chasing after the remnants of the Amorite army, and then they come back. Who might they be snarling at? Like, we had to go and chase after, but you guys are staying here in the camp. I'm not sure what the snarling is about. And now we're back to the cave. Okay, so they bring the five kings out. 23. Vaya'asu chen, vayotziu elav et chameshet hamelachim ha'ela min ha'me'ara et melech Yerushalayim et melech Hebron et melech Yarmut et melech Lachish et melech Eglon. Okay, so they did, and they brought out to him these five kings from the cave. Who are the five kings? In case we forgot, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Yarmut, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon. 24, Vayehi kahotziam et hamelachim ha'ela el Yehoshua, vayikra Yehoshua el kol ish Yisrael, vayomer el ketzinei anshei hamelchama, halchu ito, kirvu simu et raglechem al tzavarei hamelachim ha'ela, vayikrivu vayasimu et raglechem al tzavareihem. So when they brought them out, these kings, to Joshua, Joshua called to all the men of Israel and said to the captains of the men of war that went with him, come close and put your feet on the necks of these kings. And they came close and they put their feet on their necks. 25, Vayomer Alehem Yehoshua, Al Tir'u, Va'al Techatu, Chizku V'imtzu, Ki chacha ya'aseh Adonai l'chol oivechem asher atem nilchamim otam. And Joshua said to them, I think to these captains who have the feet on the necks of the kings, don't be afraid, don't be dismayed, be strong and of good courage, because this is what God will do to all of your enemies that with whom who you are fighting. 26, Vayakem Yehoshua acharechen vayemitem vayitlem al chamisha etzim vayiyu teluyim al ha'etzim ad ha'arev. And Joshua smote them afterwards and killed them and hung them on 5 trees, and they remained hanging on the trees until the evening. 27, Vayehi le'et bo hashemesh tziva Yehoshua vayoridum me'al ha'etzim vayashlichum el ha'me'ara asher nechbeu sham vayasimu avanim gedolot al pi ha'me'ara ad etzem hayom hazeh. And when the sun went down, Joshua commanded and had them lowered from the trees, and he threw them into the cave where they had hidden, and he put great stones on at the mouth of the cave until today. Okay, so let's look at all the commentary on this section right now. So let's go back to the bottom of 57. There's not much commentary. This verse is not in chronological order and is repeated in verse 43. All right, we'll get there. Okay, so this explains why they go to Gilgal in 15, but they go to Makedah in 21. So this comment is saying, this verse is placed out of order, and it should really be at the end of the chapter when they go back to Gilgal. Okay. So that apparently is according to this one commentary, Mitsuda David. Okay. And the remnant which remained. Literally, and the remnant remained of them, and they entered. This may be explained thus. And the remnant remained because of them. That is, because of the Israelites who were slothful in pursuing the battle, and therefore they managed to enter the fortified cities. Alternatively, only those destined to remain alive remained of them and entered the fortified cities. So, so it just explains why there could be some stragglers who made it back alive, because Israel wasn't doing its job utterly completely, even though from the verse it seems that it is utter annihilation. Okay, so perhaps the medieval commentators are suggesting, well, maybe this is just one of the many examples from Joshua until the temple is destroyed by the Babylonians hundreds of years later, as to why the temple was destroyed, because Israel just continues to refuse to follow the commandments completely. That could be. There's an extra comment in the old commentary that's not here. They have a comment on fortified cities. The earliest defensive walls of the Canaanites seem to have been made simply of unhewn blocks of stone. The Babylonian influence must have led to more developed means of defense. The Lachish of this period had crude brick walls, 9 or 10 feet in thickness. Fortresses such as Lachish, the nomadic Hebrew could hardly take by storm, not possessing the arms and engines of war requisite for the purpose. So a Bible scholar is suggesting if the cities were so fortified, there's no way that Israel at this time could have been able to defeat them. Okay. None wetted his tongue. See, but against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog wet his tongue. Exodus 11, a proverbial phrase to express the idea that there were no signs of hostility. Yeah. Put your feet upon the necks of these kings to demonstrate the complete subjugation of the enemy. The practice is illustrated on Assyrian sculptures. And let's see. Yeah, and that's it for the section that we read. Let's look at altar on this. Cut them down from behind on page 51. The verb zanev, derived from zanav, tail, means etymologically to cut off the tail. It's used in Deuteronomy 25:18, which is the section that I said is about the Amalekites. To the last of them, 52, more literally, until they came to an end. But as the next clause makes clear, this actually means that they were almost entirely wiped out, but some escaped. No man. The Hebrew says to no man, but the prefix le is probably a dautography triggered by le Yisrael, at or to Israel. Put your feet on the necks of these kings, as both Egyptian and Assyrian art abundantly demonstrate. This was a symbolic gesture by the victors for subjugating the defeated enemies. He impaled them on 5 poles. Since it would be somewhat odd to hang a dead body by the neck, this particular verse offers credibility to the view that the Hebrew verb in question, when applied to an execution, means to impale, not to hang. Impaling the body for public display would be an act of shaming. So I'll just say that the verb used for hanging is modern Hebrew for hanging. It's like to hang a picture on the wall. You would use this verb. So what he's saying is, in the Bible, it must mean to impale. So it's possible that when Haman was hung from his gallows, he might have been killed first and then impaled there. Or he could have been hung by a noose. It's unclear. So it depends on how we're understanding this and in what context. Are we applying our knowledge of the verb today to the Bible, or should we be understanding it differently? So Alter is saying, understand this as impaling, not hanging. And then on 53, verse 27, to this very day, this is again the etiological tag. The story explains why one finds great stones piled over the mouth of a cave at Makedah. Okay, so let's see if we can finish the chapter now. There's still several more verses. 28, we're back on page 59 in our text. V'et Makedah lachad Yehoshua bayom hahu, vayaker lefi cherev, v'et malka hecherim ota, v'yakol hanefesh asher ba lo hishir sarid, v'yas lamelech Makedah kasher asa lamelech Yericho. And Joshua took Makedah on that day and killed them by the sword. Its king smote it with the edge of the sword and the king thereof. And he utterly destroyed them, right? Totally annihilated them, all the people there. He didn't leave a straggler, and he did to the king of Makedah what he did to the king of Jericho. Vaya'avur Yehoshua v'chol Yisrael imo miMakedah livna vayilachem im livna. So Joshua and all of Israel then went with him from Makedah to Livna, and they fought against Livna. Vayitein Adonai gam ota biyad Yisrael v'yet malka vayakeha lefi cherev v'yet kol hanefesh asher ba lo hishir ba sarid vayas lemalka kasher asa lamelech Yericho. And God gave it into the hand of Israel and its king, and they slew them by the sword, all the people in it. They didn't leave a remnant, and he did to its king what he did to the king of Jericho. 31. Vayavor Yehoshua v'chol Yisrael imo milivna Lachisha vayichan aleha vayilachem ba vayitein Adonai et Lachish biad Yisrael vayilkedam bayom hasheni vayakeha lefi cherev ve'et kol hanefesh asher ba kechol asher asa lelivna. And Joshua and all of Israel then went from Livna to Lachish, and he camped against it or sieged against it and fought it. And God gave Lachish into the hand of Israel, and they took it on the second day and slew them by the sword and all the people in it and all that there was, like they had done to Livna. I will only add that the king of Lachish, remember, is one of these 5 kings that were impaled. So now what are they doing? Didn't they already defeat Lachish? But now they're defeating Lachish. Maybe these are the remnants that went back, and that now they got them. So 33, Az Allah Horam Melech Gezer La'azor et Lachish Vayakehu Yehoshua ve'atamo ad bilti hishir lo sarid. Then Horam, the king of Gezer, went up to help Lachish, and Joshua slew him and his people until there was no remnant left. Vayavor Yehoshua v'chol Yisrael imo mi Lachish eglona vayachanu aleha v'yilachamu aleha vayilkeduha bayomahu vayakuha lefi cherev v'et kol hanefesh asher ba bayomahu hecharim kechol asher asa Lachish. Then Joshua and all of Israel went with him from Lachish to Eglon. Again, remember they got their king already, and they sieged it and fought it, and they took it on that day and slew it by the sword, and all the people that were in it they totally annihilated, as they had done to Lachish. 36. Vayal Yehoshua v'chol Yisrael imo me'eglona chevrona vayilachamu aleha. Again, so Joshua went up and all of Israel with him from Eglon to Hebron, and they fought it. Remember, the king of Hebron is already dead in the cave. Vayilkeduha vayakuha lefi cherev ve'et malka ve'et kol areha ve'et kol hanefesh asher ba lo hishir sarid kechol asher asa le'eglon vayacharem ota ve'et kol hanefesh asher ba. And he took it and slew them by the sword and its king and all its cities and all the people that are in it. He didn't leave a remnant, as he had done to Eglon, and totally annihilated it and all the people that are in it. Vayashav Yehoshua v'chol Yisrael imo devira vayilachem aleha. And they returned or turned back. Joshua and all of Israel turned back and went to Devir and fought it. Vayilkedah v'et malka v'et kol areha v'yakum lefi cherev v'yacharimu et kol nefesh asher ba lo hishir sarid kasher asa lechevron ken asa ledevira ula malka v'asher asa lelivna ula malka. So he took it and its king and all its cities and smote them by the sword and annihilated all the people in it, didn't leave a remnant, as he had done to Hebron. So he did to Devir and to its king, just as he did to Livna and to its king. Vayakeha Yehoshua et kol haaretz, hahar v'hanegev v'hashepela v'ha'ashedot ve'et kol malchehem lo hishir sarid ve'et kol haneshama hecharim ka'asher tziva Adonai Elohei Yisrael. And Joshua slew the whole land from the mountain to the Negev, to the coastal plain, and the slopes, and all its kings. He didn't leave a remnant. All breath was annihilated, as the God of Israel, commanded. 41. Vayakem Yehoshua mikadesh barnea va'ad Aza ve'ad kol eretz Goshen ve'ad Giv'on. So this is interesting. Joshua slew from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza and all of the land of Goshen. What is this land of Goshen? That's Egypt. We'll see in the commentary soon. Until Giv'on. 42, Ve'kol ha'melachim ha'eleh ve'et artzam lachad Yehoshua pa'am echat ki Adonai Elohei Yisrael nilcham li Yisrael vayashav Yehoshua v'chol Yisrael imo el hamachaneh ha'gilgala. So all these kings and their land Joshua took at one time, because God, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. And Joshua and all of Israel with him returned to the camp at Gilgal. Okay, so there's not that much commentary here about the description of these battles. So the bottom of 59, Livna, between Makedah and Lachish, but its exact site is not known. On the second day, all the other cities fell to Joshua at once at Lachish. Of this city alone, it is said that he took it on the second day, an indication of its strategic strength. Later, when Sennacherib invaded Judah, this is the Assyrian king, he attacked and took the fenced cities, but Lachish successfully withstood him, and he was compelled to raise the siege. All right, so just the commentary is pointing out how strategic Lachish was and how difficult it was to take it. Just a second here. Gezer, Tel Gezer, 6 miles south of Lod. Lida is Lod, where the airport is in Israel. Excavations here have revealed many interesting remains of the Canaanite epoch, the Jewish from the days of the first and second temples, and of later periods. Mr. Claremont Ganot discovered the ancient site with the very name itself still lingering on the spot. Not only that, but he found the Levitical boundaries. In no other case have these been found. They were cut in the rock itself, not on movable stones, in 2 separate places in Greek and square Hebrew characters. So from 1874, they found Gezer, and I guess you can go to Tel Gezer today and see all of this archaeological finds. Him and his people, the city of Gezer lay too far north for Joshua's campaign, and he did not attempt its capture for the present. If he did later, he failed because it remained for hundreds of years a Canaanite fortress. See 16:10 and Judges 1. 37, the new king appointed after Horam's execution. In all the cities thereof, this implies that Hebron was the capital of the district that was assigned to Caleb. Devir, formerly known as Kiryat Sefer, it has been identified with Ed Dahariya, 11 miles southwest of Hebron. It was recaptured by the Canaanites and had to be reconquered by Othniel, the son of Kenaz, after Joshua's death. Right, so all this commentary is pointing out is that this is temporary conquest. Somehow the Canaanites are able to come together and fight again, but this is temporary victory. Okay, and the rest of the commentary on the bottom of 62, to the slopes connected with Pisgah. Here it seems to denote the regions east and west of the hill country. Kadesh Barnea, mentioned in Deuteronomy 1. It is identified with Ein Kadis, 50 miles south of Beersheba, between Mount Paran and the river of Egypt. Gaza, the most southern of the chief Philistine cities. The country of Goshen. This is not the Goshen in Egypt where the Israelites dwelt. No country or district of that name is known in the south of Canaan, but a Goshen is mentioned in chapter 15 as a town in Judah's portion, and the country of Goshen may be the district around it. At one time, the conquest was swift, one town falling rapidly after another. Repeated from verse 15, but here in its chronological order, that is going back to Gilgal.
Jonah?
Yes.
In one of the previous commentaries that Alter did, he said that this annihilation of the indigenous peoples was probably not ever done, that it was simply like a rhetorical flourish because that's what all the other neighboring tribes talked about. Then you have this very detailed description of annihilation and genocide that Joshua and the Israelites do on these tribes, but then it says that there was a remnant left over. So does that implies that Alter's earlier comment was that this may be more exaggerated?
Or it could be, yes, it's probably exaggerated. And also it's pointing out that it's temporary because the Canaanites quickly, it's not a total conquest. So it is
meaning that there were enough left over.
There are people left over somewhere to be able to militarily unite and fight again.
So in the book of Gilgamesh, which is older than this, do they talk about these kind of battles? Or
I don't know.
Okay,
don't know. The Gilgamesh, the Gilgamesh epic is about what is Iraq today. So Gilgamesh doesn't talk about the land of Israel. It's ancient Sumerian, which is where the Tigris and the Euphrates are.
Right. I was just wondering if this was like the first or the oldest story of battles and annihilations.
I don't think so. I really don't think so. There are plenty of other records from this time and before that talk about conquest. You got Egyptian records, you have other Canaanite records.
The ones that Alter was referring to, I guess.
Maybe, yeah. Okay, so let's look at the rest of Alter's comment on this. So 53. Joshua took Makkedah on that day and struck it and its king. Here begins a catalog of Joshua's conquests, conveyed in more or less identical formulas and probably from a different literary source. And the Lord gave Lachish into the hand of Israel. This notation is still another indication of the tenuous relation to history of this account of the conquest, because extra biblical evidence shows that in the 13th century BCE, the time of Joshua, and well beyond it, Lachish was not in the Israelite hands. Altogether, this report of a lightning campaign in which a large swath of the land was conquered does not accord with the archaeological record for the history of this period. One might also observe an internal contradiction between the catalog of conquests and the episode that precedes it. One of the 5 kings put to death at the Makkedah cave is the king of Jerusalem, the very man who organized the anti-Israelite alliance. One would expect that the conquest of Jerusalem should then logically figure in this account. But it was, of course, general knowledge that Jerusalem remained in Jebusite hands until over 2 centuries later, when it was taken by David. One suspects that the source from which the catalog of conquest was drawn knew nothing of an Adoni-Tzedek, king of Jerusalem, who played a central role in these battles, and that the redactor did not reconcile the 2 accounts. Okay, so there's one explanation for these stories. And the details that just don't make sense. So in 54, the Negev and the lowland, in David's time, much of the Negev was dominated by the Amalekites, and the lowland was Philistine territory. From Kadesh Barnea, this would be extravagantly far to the south in the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula. In one fell swoop, literally one time, or at once, this hyperbolic flourish again raises the problem of historicity. So that's the issue with the book of Joshua, that there's a lot of dreaming going on, and it's unclear if any of it is factual at all. All right, we'll stop here for today. Hope everybody has a good day. Shabbat Shalom, and we'll continue next week.
Okay.
Take care,
Right,
everybody.
thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.